Hail travelers, and welcome to the Knight's Realm. Here in the realm of Camelot, I, the Guardian Knight, venture deep into the archives of popular culture and entertainment to bring you all my own perspective on such matters. Well guys, it's finally happened. We finally have a Transformers movie that is everything we've been asking for. It is a movie that has zero humans, it is a movie set on Cybertron, and it is a movie that shows love for the franchise as a whole. The fact that it's taken 38 years to have another movie that holds up to the 1986 The Transformers the movie is kind of ludicrous. But, that being said, I must say I am really, really glad that we got this movie. So, like many people, I was hesitant going into this movie, hesitant to watch it, and unsure of if I would enjoy it. Because that first trailer was some hot garbage. It took all the comedy moments and jammed them all together and made it look like this was going to be another 10 jokes a minute, boring Pixar wannabe movie. And as someone who's been sick of the kidification of Transformers in recent years, what with Robots in Disguise, Cyberverse, Earthspark, and so on, I was not interested in another kidified Transformers movie. I wanted something that could live up to my favorite eras of Transformers, something that would pay homage to the lore, something that would satisfy me in the way that nothing really has, at least on screen, since Transformers Prime. As much as I've loved things like Bumblebee and, to a lesser extent, Rise of the Beasts, none of them really captured that feeling that I have watching Transformers Animated, Transformers Prime, reading the comics, even Armada once we get to like the Unicron battles. So initially I was like, great, we're gonna be stuck in the kiddified Transformers, and the only adult Transformers we're gonna get are gonna be Bayverse knockoffs. Great. And then I heard the reviews coming in. Everyone was saying this movie is the best since the original, the 1986 movie. People were saying this is the Transformers movie we've been asking for. This is a movie that gets Transformers. And I was like, are we thinking the same movie? Are you serious? But that was all the reviews. I did not see a single negative review, aside from that one IGN article where, now having watched the movie, I'm like, did you watch the movie? But every single review, from Transformers channels, from nerd culture channels, from just movie channels, people were saying, this movie is really, really good, you should go watch it. And I found myself sitting there, maybe I need to watch this. And then all the questions about it I got in my Q&A post really cemented that for me. So, earlier this week, I finally went and watched Transformers 1. And my friends, the reviews were not exaggerating. This is the single greatest Transformers movie since the 86 movie. This movie was everything a Transformers movie should be, especially a Transformers origin movie. It made me feel like I was watching that classic Transformers all over again. It made me feel like I was watching things from the early IDW, or Aligned tie-in, or Transformers Prime itself, or even like Season 3 of Transformers Animated on screen, on the big screen, the silver screen. And it was an experience. This movie is what I, as a Transformers nerd, have wanted for I don't even know how long. So, if any of you are on the fence about this movie, right here, right now, I am recommending you to go watch this movie. It is so true to the Transformers lore. It understands its characters, and it's just a fun experience from beginning to end. Now, of course, as stated in the title, this will be a spoiler review. So, if you want my non-spoiler thoughts, here they are. This is an easy 9 out of 10. This is a fantastic movie. This is a fantastic Transformers movie. If you love Transformers, go watch it. Those are my non-spoiler reviews out of the way. So, from here on out, there will be spoilers. You have been warned. Do not say I did not warn you. So to kick this off, I'll give a brief plot synopsis. So, this story follows the characters of Orion Pax and D16, who we will eventually come to know as Optimus Prime and Megatron. Orion and D are cogless miner bots in Iacon, or beneath Iacon, mining Energon, because ever since the 13 Primes were killed in an ambush by the Quintessons, the Matrix of Leadership, which controls the flow of Energon, the natural flow of Energon on Cybertron, has been lost. So, in order to supply Energon to Cybertron, they have to have these miners. Unfortunately, the miners are treated as a lower caste than anyone, both because of their menial labor and because they are cogless. They cannot transform. This is an interesting new addition to the Transformers lore, because caste systems have been a thing in Transformers for a while now. Megatron and Optimus becoming who they are by trying to overthrow a caste system has been a staple of the genre, of the franchise, since at least 2005, if not before. So adding this whole new cast, not only are they menial laborers, they can't even transform, is an interesting take on the sort of functionist ideals. With the loss of the Matrix and the 13 Primes, Cybertron is ruled over by Sentinel Prime, which is very much a callback to IDW and Aligned, and again, to a lesser extent, Transformers Animated. Our story begins with Orion Pax within the archives of Iacon, which immediately was a nice little reference. One of my biggest fears going into this movie was because they were making Orion a miner like D16, that they were going to remove his history buff nature, which is something I've always loved about the 2005 onward Optimus Prime, because even in Transformers Animated, where he's basically ex-military, police academy, whatever, he's a history buff. His entire thing is he loves history and he believes that we can learn from history, which is something I've always loved about Optimus Prime. He's a character who knows history and he applies lessons from history. It's something that lets me connect to a character who's always been a hero of mine, because I too am a history buff. So seeing that Miner Orion is still a history nerd was immediately a good feeling. It was, okay, they understand this character. So as soon as I saw him breaking into the archives, I was like, I think this character is in good hands. I'll get more into the characters themselves a little bit later. Unfortunately, as Orion is searching for more information about the Matrix, he finds that the archives are woefully empty on the location of that artifact. It pretty much just stops with the Primes dying and the Matrix disappearing. He is unfortunately discovered in the archives and pursued by two of the guards. The guards chase him across Iacon. He's actually able to keep away from them pretty effectively for being cogless. Unfortunately, they do eventually catch up to him, but he is saved by his best friend, D16, bumping into the guards. Orion and D talk on the tram down to the mines, and we learn more about their friendship. Orion is very much, there should be more to life than this. We are more than meets the eye, which they say quite a bit. I don't care. I'm a fan of this franchise. I love the in-jokes. So the constant saying of things like "we are more than meets the eye" didn't bother me at all. Okay, this is a franchise built on in-jokes. Anyway, Orion is all about there has to be more to life than this, whereas D is all we just have to stick our nose to the grindstone and just keep working. They talk about how Sentinel Prime is out there on the surface of Cybertron, attempting to save the people of Iacon by finding the Matrix. Orion thinks that he's doing much the same by scouring the archives for knowledge about the Matrix. And immediately, this sets up the conflict between the two of them. D is very inward focused. He's very focused on getting his work done, on basically surviving in a way. Whereas Orion is all about there's something more out there. Not just for himself, but for his fellow miners, especially his best friend, D16. And Orion demonstrates his love for his friend by revealing that he has found a decal of Megatronus Prime's insignia. And fans of the franchise, and anyone who knows anything about the franchise, will immediately recognize Megatronus Prime's insignia as the future Decepticon symbol. We learned that D16 has a sort of hero worship of Megatronus Prime, admiring him for his strength, as he was considered the greatest of the Primes in terms of power. Which again is a neat little foreshadowing into what D will eventually become when it comes to power. Again, I'll get more into that as we discuss the characters. So, Orion and D, we have this nice little scene introducing us to their dynamic. They give a little fist bump that becomes a pretty iconic image throughout the movie. You get the sense that they're like brothers, and as a huge fan of the Optimus and Megatron past friendship, this was really, really well done, and I really love to see it. Orion and D eventually make it to the mines and they get to work. Their supervisor, Elita 1, does not care for Orion much, because she, much like D, is very much a stickler for the rules, whereas Orion is always breaking the rules. But Orion's rule breaking, we soon learn, isn't out of selfish ambition or anything like that, as during their shift, they stumble upon some unstable energon, and one of the miners, a familiar face to Transformers nerds, Jazz, gets caught. Elita keeps saying, all of you get out of there. Orion says no. He stays behind with D16, much to D16's chagrin, and helps Jazz get out. Now, while most of the miners are like, yay, Orion saved Jazz, this is awesome, Elita only really cares that Orion is making her look bad. And she ends up being challenged by the supervisor of the mines, Darkwing, who becomes a recurring minor antagonist throughout the film, and she is demoted, removed from her position as supervisor. Now this is where there is a scene in the trailer that, in the trailer I was like, really? Are we really doing this with Optimus Prime? But in context, it actually makes a lot of sense and is actually rather true to the character. And it's the scene where he flips off Darkwing. Now, again, in the trailer, this just looked like it was going to be a comedic gag and Optimus is just some punk. But no, in the actual scene, he's standing up for Elita. He's going, oh, you think we're less than you because we can't transform? Well, guess what? My finger can transform. But it is still insubordination, and so Darkwing is about to deck him. But D16, being the suck-up that he is, decides to punch Orion himself. Unfortunately, Darkwing doesn't much care. To him, D16 is another minor to be abused, and so he punches D across the face as well. While recovering in their barracks, D and Orion continue to have this sort of debates/rapport when it comes to rule following and rule breaking. Orion keeps mentioning how he doesn't like being knocked down and treated like he's lesser by the Cogbots, whereas D16 just keeps saying, you need to keep your head down and do your job. And again, this is very reminiscent of their conflict for this first chunk of the movie. As they're talking, a message from Sentinel Prime broadcasts over the HoloNet. Not the HoloNet, that's a Star Wars thing, but basically it's the same thing. Sentinel reveals that he was unable to find the Matrix, however, he is putting on an event known as the Iacon 5000, which is a race. Well, Orion gets an idea. He thinks that if he and D can participate in the race, it will prove to the wider Cybertron that cogless miners are just as special as Cogbots. He doesn't even think he needs to be first place. He just needs to be one of the transforming robots. D, of course, thinks this is ludicrous, but Orion is incredibly motivated to do this, because he believes it will send a message to both the Cogbots and the Cogless bots. A message that we are just as important as you. Well, at first it seems like D has talked Orion down and they go to the race. However, Orion sneaks D off to a vantage point within the starting line of the race. Now, at first D is all, oh, dude, you brought me to a better place. It feels like I'm in the race. And then Orion straps a jetpack on him. And they end up joining the race themselves. And they end up doing incredibly well, beating quite a few of the transforming robots, including Darkwing, who does not take it well. Unfortunately, right at the finish line, one of them is injured. I can't remember if it was D or Orion, but one of them is injured, and so they end up limping to the finish line, but are overtaken by who I thought was Blur at first, but it turns out it's Chromia, which I'm down for more Chromia anyway, so. They unfortunately do not win the race, and both are feeling rather dejected, especially D16. He feels that Orion has just completely destroyed his reputation and that they are going to be busted down to the absolute lowest tier of miners. However, Orion, though disappointed that they were unable to lose, still feels like he sent a message. Now, at that moment, we are introduced to Arachnid, and as a fan of Transformers Prime, it was nice to see a Prime original character show up. And my goodness, she is terrifying in this movie. What in the world? Arachnid is Sentinel Prime's aide. Sentinel Prime comes in and reveals he actually was a fan of the stunt they pulled, especially since it created a boost in morale for the other miners, who have now increased their productivity significantly. And he kind of wants D and Orion to be mascots of a sort. D is incredibly elated by that and forgives Orion, though he does still sass him. Unfortunately, Darkwing comes in. And this is a plot of the movie that my brother and I went with my brother to watch it, weren't certain about. Was Darkwing put up to this by Sentinel, or was this him going above Sentinel's head? So Darkwing, feeling slighted for having been beaten in the race by these two, throws them into sub-level 50, which is 10 levels below what they believe the lowest sub-level is. And again, I and my brother were uncertain if this was Darkwing's own idea, or if Sentinel had put him up to this. I'm honestly not sure. So, but either way, Orion and D16 are thrown into sub-level 50 because Darkwing is a jerk, no matter how you slice it. And in sub-level 50, they meet the third, or fourth, because we did already meet Elita 1, the fourth main character of the film, B-127, also known to us Transformers nerds as Bumblebee. Now, Bumblebee is a character that going into this, I also wasn't sure that I would like. My fears were assuaged because I actually really like this character. He is not my ideal concept for Bumblebee, but he's far from my least favorite take on the character either. Again, I'll get more into Bumblebee when we get into the character section. So, Bumblebee is a little insane because he's been locked down here for a long time. I'm going to stop calling him Bumblebee, I'm going to call him B, because he's not actually called Bumblebee in the film, so I'll just call him B for now. So, B is a little nuts, he's happy to have friends, and he reveals that his only other friends before Orion and D showed up were these junk bots, including two really funny references. One, Tron, a reference to Bumblebee's voice actor, Keegan-Michael Key, and his role of substitute teacher Garvey in the Key and Peele substitute teacher sketch when he's saying the names wrong. You done messed up, Aaron. That was so funny when he said Aatron. I laughed. And then there was the other one named Steve, which a lot of Transformers nerds have speculated is a reference to the nickname often given to the Vehicons in Transformers Prime, Steve. And the last guy's name was a bunch of numbers and letters. I did not memorize it. Mostly because it didn't really matter. But anyway, as Bumblebee is introducing them to Steve and Aatron and the other guy, it turns out that Steve has a holo projector in his head. Orion looks at the holo projector, unfortunately decapitating Steve, may he rest in pieces. But the holo communicator is actually a message from one of the 13 primes, Alpha Trion, and it includes coordinates to where the primes fell. Orion believes that these coordinates could lead them to the Matrix. Now, D is hesitant to follow Orion on another harebrained scheme. However, he is tempted by the thought of being able to deliver the Matrix to Sentinel Prime personally. And B is just happy to leave Sublevel 50 behind. So they climb up the garbage chute and arrive at the Energon trams, which carry scrap and other things to the surface. As they sneak aboard the trams, however, they are discovered by Elita 1, who ends up being trapped with them and attempts to stop the tram from going to the surface. She is unfortunately unable to, as she, along with all the others, ends up being mystified by the appearance of Cybertron's surface, which looked so good. The ever-changing landscape was an interesting take. It looked really cool. It was beautiful. I love seeing a Cybertron not ravaged by war. So I loved this. I loved this a lot. The tram is unfortunately knocked off course by said ever-shifting landscape, and the 4 robots are now stranded. Elita is convinced to go with them, begrudgingly, on the condition that she leads the charge. Orion is just happy to find the Matrix. He's not looking to be in command of anything. He's like, as long as you're with us, I don't care. So they follow the map and eventually arrive at the coordinates. During the trek, of course, we get some more moments between Orion and D showing why they're good friends. Bumblebee is a chatterbox. B is a chatterbox, not Bumblebee. And Elita is like, why am I with these idiots? It's good for comedy and it's good for characterization. Eventually they arrive at a strangely organic location with these really cool cyber deer. I am a huge fan of seeing more Cybertronian wildlife. Like not Maximals, Predacons, Terracons, or whatever, actual wildlife on Cybertron. It adds an element of world building that is woefully lacking in a lot of tellings of the story. So seeing these Cybertronian deer was really cool to me. Plus they had this really cool early warning system with danger. There are discs in their antlers that would glow red when they're in danger, and it was really cool. Well, the danger that the deer were tipped off to turns out to be a Quintesson ship. So they flee from the Quintessons and end up hiding in this abandoned, destroyed city, and eventually find the cave wherein the primes had fallen, and we see the bodies of the 13 primes. And it is really cool, as a huge fan of the wider Transformers mythos, to see the primes, even if they're dead. And some of them were definitely modeled after prior incarnations, like Vector Prime looked just like Vector Prime from Transformers Cybertron. Megatronus Prime had the Decepticon insignia as his face, which is a really cool look. Zeta Prime was over here looking like Cybertronian King Arthur, and I approve. That's really cool. And he has an axe, which will be important later. They are grieved to discover that the Matrix is not within Zeta's chest. In this version of events, Zeta is the leader of the Primes instead of Prima, though Prima does still exist. However, they soon discover that one of the Primes is alive, and it's the one who sent that transmission, Alpha Trion. They awaken Alpha, and he reveals to them the truth of Cybertron. that Sentinel is not, in fact, a Prime, again, a reference to his aligned continuity counterpart, as well as Nominus Prime from the IDW comics, but had actually betrayed the Primes into the clutches of the Quintessons. This is an interesting take because typically the one who betrays the Primes is Megatronus, thus becoming the Fallen in the process. But this version of Megatronus seems like he was a pretty solid guy, which is an interesting take. I wasn't sure how I felt about that at first, but as I thought about it, it's like, okay, no, I'm okay with this. I'm okay with this. I prefer him being the Fallen, but I'm okay with him being just one of the 13 in this version of events, especially since it ties into the wider story. But Sentinel ended up betraying the Primes because he wanted to become a Prime himself. He wanted to claim the Matrix for himself and rule over Cybertron. Unfortunately, the Matrix, as we all know, is earned. The Matrix will not open for those who are unworthy. And much like in Revenge of the Fallen, it disintegrated in Sentinel's clutches. As if confirming Alpha Trion's words, Sentinel Prime himself soon arrives and treats with the Quintesson High Commander in full view of the other bots, who unfortunately are heard by Arachnid. This reveal shakes the bots to their core, especially D16, who throughout most of this movie has been kind of a Sentinel Prime fanboy. Like, he likes Sentinel Prime only a little bit less than he likes Megatronus Prime. So to learn that Sentinel not only has lied to him, but killed his idol, Megatronus Prime, and to learn that they all once had cogs, they were born with cogs, but they were ripped out of their chests before they were activated, absolutely destroys D16. Orion feels that they now need to expose Sentinel to the wider Cybertron. Expose him as the liar that he is. D16 has other ideas, however. He wants to kill Sentinel. Alpha Trion sees a worthy spark in these 4 bots, and so bestows upon them 4 of the Prime's T-Cogs. He bids them to take the memory crystal that he has that contains Sentinel's betrayal and reveal his wickedness to Iacon. Unfortunately, Sentinel's minions close in on them, and the other bots are forced to flee. Alpha Trion stays behind to hold them off, but unfortunately, despite his best efforts, is captured by Arachnid. The bots struggle when it comes to transforming at first, which was both a comedic scene, and honestly, it makes sense. If they've never transformed before, they wouldn't know how to do it. It also led into a really awesome scene where Elita, Orion, and D16 finally fully transform, where B is kind of left in the dust, poor little guy. But the scene where they finally fully achieve transformation is a really cool one. They're able to escape Sentinel's minions and flee into the wilderness. Back at Iacon, Sentinel is interrogating Alpha Trion, and it is in this scene that we truly get the full scope of Sentinel's villainy, as he taunts Alpha and eventually takes his life in a rather brutal manner. Sentinel tells Arachnid to hunt down the others. On this trek from Alpha Trion's cave, we see the cracks in Orion and D's relationship really begin to form. Now with the power of transformation, D is feeling rather sure of himself, rather ready to absolutely annihilate Sentinel, while Orion is over here pleading caution, in an interesting role reversal for the two of them. This is also where we begin to see a change in D other than his new transformable body, as his eyes are now a shade of orange instead of the bright yellow they had previously been. The 4 end up getting ambushed by figures that will be quite familiar to Transformers nerds, as we see the Seekers. Both iconic ones, such as Skywarp, Thundercracker, Thrust, Ramjet, Dirge, and Slipstream, and a bunch of generic ones. And the bots are brought before the leader of these bots known as the High Guard, Starscream, voiced by Steve Buscemi. Starscream is attended by Shockwave and Soundwave, as well as several other Seekers. Orion attempts to recruit the High Guard in his fight against Sentinel. However, Starscream feels that these 4 bots cannot possibly help him, and he'd prefer to keep doing his hit-and-run guerrilla tactics against Sentinel. In this instance, D16 has had enough, and he ends up fighting Starscream for leadership of the High Guard. And he absolutely eviscerates Screamer, crushing his larynx in the process, and giving him that high, shrieky voice reminiscent of G1. That's not something I needed an origin for, but I'm okay with it. It was actually kind of interesting. This is also the first time when we see D16's fusion cannon and his whole might makes right mentality. The High Guard are impressed by his strength and swear loyalty to him. Unfortunately, they are then ambushed by Arachnid and her men, and D, B, Starscream, and several others are taken captive. Orion and Elita are forced to pick up the pieces. Orion feels somewhat down on himself at this point, feeling like everything was his fault. Elita tries to give him a pep talk. I mean, it works. It was just kind of not a good pep talk. But anyway, Orion is able to inspire the loyalty of the remainder of the High Guard, partially due to Elita shocking Shockwave in the eye, which I thought was a neat little reference to the rivalry that those two have in G1. Just neat little reference that I, as a Transformers nerd, picked up. Orion delivers his first transform and roll out moment, and he and the High Guard make their way to Iacon. Back in Iacon, Sentinel is now taunting D16 and the captured High Guard. D is absolutely enraged at Sentinel's audacity and stands up to him. In retaliation, Sentinel takes the Megatronus Prime decal that Orion had gifted to D earlier and brands it permanently onto his chest, which is where Megatron's Decepticon insignia ends up in most versions of the character. However, this torture is not enough to keep D down, and in fact just makes him want to rebel even more. While he is being tortured, Orion makes his way back to the mines, where he gets a nice little comeuppance on Darkwing, who is tormenting Ironhide. He backhands Darkwing and sends him flying into some machinery. This is a moment where we really get to see this Orion shine as the future Optimus Prime, as he speaks to his former fellows, one as an equal, and two in a rather inspirational manner. He tells them that they are more than meets the eye. He repeats Alpha Trion's, it is not the cog, but the spark, and tells them that they can stand up against Sentinel. And one thing I was afraid of when I was watching this scene was that they were going to try and Marvelify it. Those of you who have watched more modern Marvel movies, you know that there is a tendency to undercut dramatic moments with a bad joke. And unfortunately, that's something that has snaked its way into the wider Hollywood. And this felt like exactly the kind of moment that would get ruined by that, but it wasn't. We got to have Orion give his inspiring speech, and it wasn't turned into a joke, which was a level of sincerity that I have been missing in Hollywood for a long, long time. So I was really happy to see that not only was this powerful moment not cut off, but we got this very powerful Prime moment. We got to see Optimus Prime being Optimus Prime, even though he's not Prime yet. His words are enough to inspire the miners to rally against Sentinel and his men. And so the miners and the High Guard end up attacking the Iacon Spire. In order to expose Sentinel, they decide to capture Arachnid and transfer everything she has ever seen Sentinel do or say onto the holonet in order to expose him, because the data crystal that Alpha Trion gave them was destroyed when the High Guard were attacked. D16 is becoming slowly more unhinged and keeps trying to get close to Sentinel to finish him off, while Orion is over here trying to solve things in the right way. Eventually, they are able to capture Arachnid and transfer her memories over the holonet, revealing to all of Iacon that Sentinel is a liar, that he has been making deals with the Quintessons, and that he tore the cogs from their chests when they were born. This causes the entire city to turn on Sentinel. Sentinel's entire empire is crumbling around him. However, it's not enough for D16 to expose Sentinel, as he now attempts to end him. Orion, not wanting to see his friend go down a dark path, steps in between the two of them, and is unfortunately fatally injured in the process. D16, at first, is sad that his friend is injured. However, that sadness turns to rage as he feels that Orion betrayed him for Sentinel. And so, saying, "I'm done saving you," he drops Orion into Cybertron's core, his eyes now blood red. He then turns to Sentinel Prime and tears him in half, tearing his T-Cog, which originally belonged to Megatronus Prime, from his chest, placing it in his own, and renaming himself Megatron. This scene was a new level of hype, but it only gets better. Falling into Cybertron's core, Orion Pax hears the voice of Alpha Trion and sees the spirits of the 13 Primes, telling him that Primus has recognized him as worthy and gives him the Matrix. Simultaneously, with D16 declaring himself Megatron, Primus, through Alpha Trion, declares Orion Pax to be Optimus Prime. The Matrix reformats Orion, and he flies out of Cybertron's core and lands, the Matrix gleaming in his chest in front of Megatron. The two enter a battle, with D16 enraged that Primus saw fit to give Orion the Matrix. The two battle, the first fight between these two friends turned enemies, and it is everything it should have been. Optimus unsheaths his iconic axe, which I'm pretty sure is supposed to be Zeta Prime's axe weapon from earlier, and uses it to fight against Megatron and the High Guard. The fight is long, and it is brutal, and where a single blast from a lower-powered D16 was previously enough to eviscerate Orion Pax, a blast from now Megatron's fusion cannon just knocks Optimus Prime back, showing just how powerful a Prime is, and putting them on pretty equal footing. My brother pointed out that because Megatron has Megatronus's T-Cog, maybe he has a bit of the power of a Prime in him as well, which I'm not sure if that's what they intended, but it is pretty cool. So we get this fight between Optimus and Megatron, with Optimus continually begging Megatron, "Stop this, please," and Megatron just trying to destroy him. Eventually, Optimus is able to win out. He tells Megatron that he has become worse than Sentinel, and that for the sake of their friendship, he's going to let him live, but he must take the High Guard and leave Iacon forever. Megatron then delivers a chilling, "This is not over, Prime," officially signifying the end of their friendship. Megatron and the High Guard leave Iacon, and all the inhabitants of Iacon surround Optimus. Elita declares that Optimus is now their leader, and Optimus declares her his second-in-command. He then holds the Matrix over his head in the iconic Matrix opening pose, and Energon begins to flow freely throughout Cybertron once more. The cogless bots are now provided with cogs and given some of their more iconic appearances: Ironhide, Jazz, Sideswipe, Sunstreaker, Red Alert, and so on. We get a nice closing monologue from Optimus, telling the Quintessons, stay away or we'll kick your skid plates back to Quintessa, and getting a neat little I am Optimus Prime to close it out. We then get a comedic mid-credit scene with B, but the real meat is in the post-credit scene, where we see that Megatron has now renamed the High Guard as Decepticons. And this movie does what a lot of post-2010 stories have done with the names of Autobots and Decepticons. Optimus has named the Autobots because of autonomy and freedom, whereas Megatron names the Decepticons that in retaliation against the deception of Sentinel and, in his mind, Optimus. So it's sort of an ironic name in a way, which, again, it's not something I ever needed an explanation for, but I'm okay with it. We get the iconic Decepticons rise up, back, nice little flashback to Transformers Animated, and we see that Megatron has now branded the new Decepticon insignia on the High Guard, who are now his Decepticons. So that is the plot of this movie. Of course, this is a TLDW sort of situation. There are a lot of moments that I didn't mention, jokes, character beats, and so on. So with that out of the way, let's now dive into the story and what I like about it. I really like how this story took elements from previous iterations of the Transformers mythos and kind of combined them. We have a lot of Aligned in here, a lot of IDW, a bit of animated. We've even got some nice references to the movies, because the movies were a big part of some people's experience when it comes to Transformers. They're just, not the best. But there are some neat little references to the movies, like the way that Megatron takes out Sentinel is very reminiscent of how Jazz was slain in the first movie. Rip in peace. But anyway, I'm glad to see Jazz survive this one. He just lost one leg. There are jokes, there are moments that are just total fan service, and I'm perfectly fine with that. Fan service is good if the story being told around the fan service is also good. The problem is when you try to use fan service as your sole selling point. It's why I love Spider-Man No Way Home, because, yeah, there's a lot of fan service there, but at its core there is this neat story about Tom's Spider-Man coming into his own. Not to mention the fact that it takes story beats from something like One More Day and actually turns it into a really decent story. So that's why I like No Way Home, but it's part of why The Flash, for example, failed. The Flash tried to cash in on that nostalgia for Keaton's Batman, for Man of Steel, when nostalgia wasn't going to save this movie, especially considering how controversial a figure its lead performer was at that time. You needed more than nostalgia to get people to like this movie. And with Transformers 1, there's nostalgia aplenty, but it also tells its own story. It takes the Transformers mythos that us deep lore nerds have known for years and tells its own version of it, and I really like that. It also was able to balance comedy and drama in a way that I've always loved about Transformers, because people tend to assume when I say I like my Transformers stories to be more serious that I'm saying, oh, they need to be humorless. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I like jokes in my Transformers, okay? I laugh at Prime being an absolute dork in animated all the time. Alright? I laugh at Prime being an absolute dork in G1 all the time. I mean, that scene where, after defeating the fake Optimus Prime, Spike is all, is it really you, Prime? And Prime's all, yes, Spike. This time I am indeed me. Myself. Whoever I am. I love that scene. The scene is so funny. So I'm not opposed to humor in my Transformers. My problem is when the humor overtakes the dramatic moments, because lest we forget, these robots are kind of in a universe-spanning war, and this movie captures the dramatic moments incredibly well. The things such as Arise Optimus Prime, I am Megatron, the reveal of Sentinel's betrayal, all done incredibly well. The humor did not detract from the drama, and that's a balance that films in general need to learn how to achieve. So I really liked that. The jokes were funny, the dramatic scenes were intense. Orion and D16's story and them becoming Optimus and Megatron made me so sad because, again, this is one of my favorite hero-villain dynamics, the we were once brothers and now we're enemies. It's why I love Obi-Wan and Anakin. It's why I love Moses and Ramses in Prince of Egypt. It's why I love Charles Xavier and Magneto. These kinds of stories speak to me, and seeing that friendship, not just hearing about it, fall apart was so gut-wrenching and so well done. Now, with this general stuff and me gushing about the movie out of the way, now let's talk about the characters. Now, there are 5 central characters to this plot. Orion Pax / Optimus Prime, D16 / Megatron, B-127 / Bumblebee, Elita 1, and Sentinel Prime. Other characters like Alpha Trion, Starscream, and Arachnid are also important to the story, but are ultimately secondary characters, and characters like Soundwave, Shockwave, Ironhide, Jazz are tertiary characters. And while I would have loved to see more from these other Autobots and Decepticons, I'm fine with what we got. Like, a core, smaller cast allows for more storytelling, and I just have to hope that eventually we'll get more with these versions of these other characters. Orion is definitely the protagonist of this film, the main character, the Luke Skywalker. And again, he was probably the character I was most concerned about going in. I was concerned they were going to turn Optimus into a dude bro. And they didn't. They didn't turn him into a dude bro. He's sassy, and I've always liked sassy Prime. I mean, again, you go back to G1, G1 Prime was a snark lord. In animated, he's pretty sassy as well. He's not super sassy in Transformers Prime, which is probably my one criticism of that version of the character, even though that's a version of a character who I love and I have a whole video defending him. I kind of like Optimus's sarcastic sense of humor, and I always have. And he's got that in this one. The way he talks back to characters like Darkwing is, one, incredibly funny, and 2, it never feels out of place. Again, the scene where he defends Elita 1, again, in the trailer, it made it look like he was just being a dude bro, flipping off Darkwing because he's a rebellious young man. But no, he was flipping off Darkwing because Darkwing was being a jerk to his coworker. And it shows the respect that Orion has for Elita, even though Elita didn't have much respect for him. His moments like when he was joking while being chased by the archive guards. It was very Aladdin. Like, I found myself going, oh, Aladdin Pax in the theater. But much like Aladdin, he's a punk with a heart of gold. He's not reeling against the system out of any selfish desire or whatever, and that's something that I loved about Orion's character. Every reckless action he did was for the greater good. He's looking for the Matrix in the archives because he wants to help Sentinel Prime restore Cybertron to its fullness, because he doesn't want himself and his fellow miners to be stuck mining. And it's always about the others. Like, yeah, that benefits him, but it's always more about the others. He's self-sacrificing. He stays behind in the mine, again, not to defy Elita 1, but to save a fellow miner. He saved Jazz. He and Dee entered the race not for recognition, but to inspire the other miners and to show people that miners are capable of doing just as much as the Cogbots, as well as to show D16 that he's capable. I mean, he gives Dee the Megatronus decal because he knows how much his friend loves Megatronus. Which is why that scene in Alpha Trion's cave where Dee tells Orion, oh, it's all about you, it's never been about him. It's always been about everyone else. Because, yeah, again, these things will benefit him, but he never talks exclusively about himself. It's always me and you, or us. It's never just about himself. If anything, it's always about D. But we'll discuss that when we get to D16's character. But Orion, it's always about everyone else. And don't get me wrong, he definitely has an arc. He starts off reckless and he ends up being wiser, and I like that. Because it shows he's wanting to do the right thing, but he's going about it the wrong way. Because, sorry, entering the race was a stupid move. Sneaking into the archives is a stupid move. He's doing stupid things for the right reasons, and that's his arc. He grows into the wise and competent Optimus Prime at the end, while being the reckless Orion Pax at the beginning. But he's always motivated by the greater good. Good for Cybertron, good for the other miners, good for his friend, and of course good for himself, because who doesn't want to better their own situation? And another thing that I love is just how much the other characters underestimate or misestimate Orion. Elita thinks he's just some guy who hates authority, when again, he's trying to better his people's lives in his own way. And again, D keeps thinking, oh, you're so selfish and everything's about you, when that couldn't be further from the truth. Orion wants to help D. Orion wants to help the other miners. And if he ends up benefiting himself in the process, that's a bonus. The fact that he took the fall, both for Elita's firing and for being caught at the Iacon 5000, shows that. He doesn't want D or Elita to get in trouble. He just wants to make life better. And it's something that I really love. And again, he's going about it in kind of the wrong way, which is his arc. It shows that he's imperfect, but he's getting there, which I loved. I mean, the fact that he's willing to humor B is also a sign of that. He's not just humoring B because, like, oh, we gotta humor this guy. No, he actually likes B. Yeah, he thinks he's a little weird, but he likes him. Unlike Elita, who's all, this guy's annoying. Or when the truth about Sentinel was revealed, Orion's first thought is, we need to tell everyone. And it wasn't for the glory. I mean, even convincing D to go to the surface in the first place, it wasn't about his glory. It was like, hey, you could deliver the Matrix to Sentinel Prime yourself. Orion didn't need any of that glory. He wanted to help Iacon, but he knew that D likes that kind of thing. So I love that they captured, he's selfless, but he wasn't always the best at doing the selfless thing properly. So I like that, and I like his arc. I like how he mellowed out, and how you can see how the experiences of this movie have made him wiser, have made him more like the Prime we will come to know. And Chris Hemsworth captures a young Peter Cullen incredibly well. There's moments where that growl enters his voice that Peter Cullen has that I was like, okay, this guy gets Optimus. And Chris Hemsworth is one of those few celebrity voice actors that I actually don't have a problem with, because in his movies, he's got a ton of range. There's a lot of celebrity voice actors that it's like, you cast that guy for a stunt, didn't you? But Chris Hemsworth is not one of those, in my opinion. He is an amazing actor, he has so much range, and he did a really good job playing a younger Optimus Prime. And I really want to see him play a young Prime a lot more going forward. Peter Cullen will always be the number one Optimus voice for me. That is full stop, always going to be the case. I love Gary Chalk, I love David Kaye, but Peter Cullen will always be number one. Chris Hemsworth might be number two at this point. I don't know. I'd have to watch it again, measure him against David Kaye and Gary Chalk, because I do really like their performances as well. Now, Megatron, D16, while Orion is definitely the protagonist, D's story is the standout in this one. Now, I've always been a huge fan of the post-G1 Megatron kind of stories. That he was once someone else before he was the monster, and I'm a huge fan of how this movie portrays it. D16 starts the movie very much, oh, we gotta keep a low profile, nose to the grindstone, eventually we'll pay our dues to society and we'll be able to grow beyond that. Whereas Orion is all, we gotta make our change right here, right now. D is very much a believer in the system, whereas Orion is a believer that the system needs fixed. However, when their worldviews are shattered by Alpha Trion and the reveal of Sentinel's betrayal, Orion maintains his whole the system needs to be fixed, it's just now I know what to do to fix it. Whereas D feels like, no, the system is entirely bad and needs to be completely torn down, which is very much how he was in the Aligned continuity, where Orion believed that the system was in need of reform. Megatronus believed that the system needed to be torn down by force, and in the process becomes an even worse tyrant, and we see that in a sort of fast-tracked version in this movie. D goes from an absolute believer in the system to someone who is ready to completely tear it down, whereas Orion essentially maintains his belief in what needs to be done. D16's slow transformation, so to speak, from this quiet, unassuming, hard-working miner to the tyrant that he would become was masterfully done. He was a victim of the system without even realizing it, and when he realized it, he decided to fight against the system in the worst way possible. I love the way that the two of them go about trying to take down Sentinel at the end. Orion is over here saying, we need to expose him, we need to do this the right way. Whereas D is the entire time, we need to destroy him, we need to get rid of him. And while he does eventually take Sentinel out, the thing is, if he had taken Sentinel out before Orion had exposed his crimes, Sentinel would have become a martyr. That wouldn't have been good. That would have been bad. People would see Megatron as some insurgent, not as a hero. Whereas Orion exposing Sentinel's crimes allowed people to see him, Optimus Prime, as the hero, as the one who will lead Iacon into a new era of peace. Megatron was dooming himself and his cause to destruction. Now, am I shedding any tears over Sentinel's death? Absolutely not. That guy got exactly what he deserved. But from a logistical standpoint, if Megatron had taken him out before Orion had done his thing, the entire plan would have fallen apart. The other thing that I mentioned earlier is how D keeps saying that Orion is selfish, that it's all about Orion, when in actuality it's all about D, is evident in that very same conversation. Orion is all, we need to expose this, we need to bring this before Iacon, whereas D is just, I want to kill him, I want to get rid of him, I want to destroy him. It's all about me, I. Orion is looking outward. D16 is looking inward. And that is the difference between Optimus Prime and Megatron. Optimus saw an issue, and he saw how it affected everyone, and decided we need to fix that. Megatron felt victimized by an issue, and decided to destroy it. It's, again, very much the Charles-Magneto thing. Both Charles and Magneto were victims of the system. Now, of course, Eric was victimized twice over because he was also a Jew in the Holocaust. So it's understandable why he would be more angry and more vengeful than Charles, but just because it's understandable doesn't mean it's right. Charles is over here wanting to build bridges between mutant and humankind, where Magneto is a mutant supremacist. He's going to solve one problem with another problem, and that's exactly what Megatron is doing as well. He's going to solve one problem with another problem. Whereas Optimus is, no, we need to be the solution, not another problem. And I love that dichotomy. They both come from the same place, but they go about it in different ways and have different motivations. Another example of the dichotomy between Megatron and Optimus is in how they inspire their followers. The scene where Orion goes to the other miners is all about, you are more than meets the eye. We can do this. It's very outward. Whereas With Megatron, it's no more will we bend, I am Megatron, I will lead you, I, me. And the way they inspire them is also very different, because Megatron is all about my power, my strength, I am the strongest, I will rule. Where Optimus is all, this is about inspiring others, this is about uplifting others, not my power is great, so follow me. And it is just the perfect introduction to what will eventually become their slogans and their catchphrases. We've got freedom is the right of all sentient beings versus peace through tyranny. And then there's the fact, between the two of them, Orion never sought to be a leader. As soon as they found out about Sentinel's betrayal, D16 kept trying to take the lead. When they got to the High Guard, he was over here like, you will follow me. We will destroy Sentinel. Orion took the leadership role when it was thrust upon him, and he found that he wore it well. Whereas Megatron sought out the role of the leader and took it for himself, both from Starscream and then from Sentinel. D's downfall is very believable, it's very tragic, and in many ways it's the heart of the movie. The thing I love about it is that you can understand him. You know why he is the way that he is, even though at the end he stumbles. He does the wrong thing. And I'm not talking about taking out Sentinel. No, again, I'm not shedding any tears over that. It's the whole, we will destroy everything he has built. We will tear Iacon down, and I will lead us into a new era. He became something worse than Sentinel ever could have been, which has always been one of my favorite aspects of Megatron. In attempting to overthrow a corrupt government, he becomes something worse. But you walk away from this movie feeling for both Orion and D16, understanding both Optimus Prime and Megatron, but ultimately rooting for the Autobots. And that's exactly what a Transformer story should do. You should understand the Decepticons, but you should agree with the Autobots. And that's what I love. It's the sympathetic, tragic villain who went too far. The cool motive, he's still the bad guy kind of thing. And I just found myself really excited to see more from this version of Megatron, to see him continue to grow into the monster that I know he eventually becomes, as well as my excitement for this version of Optimus, seeing him grow into the inspiring warrior and hero that he will become. Now, I think Optimus is well on his way to that, and I think Megatron is as well, but these are still early days. The other two protagonists are a bit of a different story. Orion and D16, Optimus and Megatron, are the heart of this movie. They are the main focus. Bumblebee is in many ways the comic relief character, which I've mentioned before, it's not my ideal Bumblebee. I kind of like the kind of Bumblebee who he's young, he's plucky, he's small, but he's stronger than people give him credit for. I like that he's kind of a chill guy. He's just kind of there. He keeps his head down and he does what he needs to, but he's trustworthy and he's reliable. That's what I like about Bumblebee. Like, it's why I'm not a huge fan of animated Bumblebee, because he feels more like Hotshot, and he was originally intended to be Hotshot, so that's part of why. But characters like Hotshot or Sideswipe are the ones who are always trying to do more. They're always getting into trouble, which is like animated Bumblebee. This Bumblebee is more of a comic relief character. Definitely included because he's the other most iconic Transformer besides Optimus and Megatron. Understandable. The major nerd in me kind of would have preferred if it was Dion instead, or have someone like Ironhide or Jazz take the fourth slot in the group, but I'm okay with it. Bumblebee is a very entertaining character, he's very funny, his humor isn't overwhelming. There's one particular joke that you think, oh, this could get annoying, but they cut it off early enough, in my opinion. His scene where he finally gets his weapons and stuff is a really funny one. Again, while I wouldn't say he's my favorite version of Bumblebee, he is still fun. He did what he needed to do, he was entertaining, he was kind of tragic in his own way as well. Comet and Cam has a great video of the tragedy of Bumblebee in this movie. I recommend you guys check it out. But yeah, no, I liked Bumblebee. He was fine. Now, the weakest of the main four is definitely Elita 1. And that's not to say that she's a bad character, but she's not as good as the other three. She doesn't have those emotional highs and lows that Orion and D16 have, and she doesn't have the funny moments that B has. She's the other character, and I'm fine with that. Again, she's inoffensive, and she's fun in her own right, and I'm glad that we're getting some Elita rep, rather than RC again. I mean, RC is in the movie, but she's a background character. But I do like the character. She's just the weakest of an otherwise incredibly strong main cast. She has her own little arc with coming to accept Orion as a leader, recognizing that he's not just a punk who's doing things for punk reasons. And there was a hint of flirtation there at the end that I kind of noticed, and I kind of hope they lean into that, because I've always loved Elita 1 and Optimus Prime's relationship. But now we come to the final core character of this movie, and that is the villain, Sentinel Prime. Oh boy, I hate this guy. I hated this guy. He was so well done. He very much felt like a combination of, as I've said before, he's got that smug, I'm better than you attitude of animated Sentinel. He's got that showboaty, I am your savior of Aligned and IDW Sentinel. He's got a lot of homages in his design to previous Sentinels. Like, he's got the color scheme very much of Prime and Aligned. He's got the weapons of the movie. John Hamm does an amazing job at delivering just this absolute scumbag of a character, and I am a huge fan of it. His defeat at the end was so satisfying. They definitely took Sentinel, they took, like, the Functionists and the High Council and all these other bad things that were the main reason why Cybertron was failing in these other continuities, and combined them all into Sentinel, which made for a simpler story, but I really was a fan. The angel wings that he has, delivering this whole, I'm better than you, I am your hero. People have mentioned that it very much gives off Homelander vibes, which I very much agree with. So Sentinel was an amazingly well done villain. It does lead me into just this whole diatribe of Sentinel is just the worst in every timeline that is in G1. It's so funny to me, because in Generation 1, Sentinel Prime was Optimus Prime's predecessor. That's all we really know about him. We know he fought against the Decepticons, we know that he was heroic, and we have his design, and that's about it. And it's like every writer that has brought him up since then has gone, hey, you know Optimus Prime's predecessor? Yeah, what if we make him, like, the worst? And it's a really funny trend, because you have IDW 2005, where he's a corrupt politician. You have Transformers Animated, where he's just the jerkiest jerk who ever lived. We're gonna say lived. And then you have Dark of the Moon, where he's a traitor, and he's been working with Megatron this whole time. You have the Aligned continuity, where he's a false Prime, and he's kind of an arrogant jerkbag. And now you have this movie, where he's all of those things combined. And he's the reason why everything is bad. And he basically took the Fallen's role, in a way, because he betrayed the 13, which is exactly what the Fallen did in most continuities. So he's just the absolute worst. But he was incredibly well done. They wrote a villain that you would be satisfied to see be taken down. He was enjoyable whenever he was on screen. So I am a fan of this version of Sentinel as a villain. I forgot to mention, because I mentioned John Hamm and Chris Hemsworth doing a fantastic job. Brian Tyree Henry as Megatron also did a fantastic job. I have not seen many things that Brian Tyree Henry has been in, So I did not have any reference going into this, but he did an amazing job. So I just wanted to put that there. In terms of the more side characters, Alpha Trion was an interesting take on the character. Lawrence Fishburne did an amazing job, but he always does. But Alpha Trion was interesting. I love the little references to him being Orion's mentor, in the fact that he's the reason why Orion went on this quest in the first place. Arachnid was an excellent secondary villain. She was incredibly creepy. I kind of wish they had done more with her, kind of like in Transformers Prime, but I do really like this version of the character. She was an effective, more Boba Fett-y side villain, and I was a huge fan of that. I loved the references to characters like Jazz and Ironhide and RC. I loved seeing them, and I hope to see more of them in future versions of this story. I do find myself wishing that the Quintessons played a bigger role. I like that they featured and I like that they were referenced, but there's a part of me that wishes we had more with them, because I like what we got, but I just kind of wish we had more. But again, there's opportunities for that in future things, tie-in comics, sequels, whatever. Darkwing was a fun tertiary antagonist. Seeing him eventually get his comeuppance at the hands of Orion was incredibly satisfying. Just a bully getting what he deserved. And I think that's all when it comes to the characters. The music in this film was spectacular. Brian Tyler, of course, did the score for Transformers Prime, and I love the score of Transformers Prime. Again, Cybertron looked gorgeous. It was great to see a Cybertron not torn by war. I'd love to see eventually a take on a Golden Age Cybertron, but I did like this sort of Silver Age-y Cybertron as well. The designs were excellent. Like, the minor versions of the characters were kind of intentionally ugly, but as soon as they got their cogs, they looked awesome. I especially love just how Megatron and Optimus's designs grow throughout the movie. Again, the 13 looked awesome. I seriously want a figure of that Megatronus. He looks really cool. Arachnid was sufficiently creepy. Again, I loved the angel wings on Sentinel, really hitting home that whole, he thinks he's good, but he's not. He's scum. And from there, what else more is there to say about this movie? This is an amazing movie. This is an incredibly well done film. It captures the essence of Transformers in a way that even movies that I have liked, like Bumblebee, have not. So, again, if you were on the fence, go watch this movie. Of course, if you were on the fence, you shouldn't have sat through this spoiler section, but whatever. I am hoping for more from this continuity. Hopefully in the form of sequels, but if we get like a spin-off series or tie-in comics or more tie-in novels or whatever, that would be good too, because I would love to see what they do with this version of the Transformers. So, thank you all for joining me on my quest, and I will see you all on our next adventure, whenever that may be.